Dr. Chris Yu is the Chief Executive Officer at Systems Imagination and a leader in the latest biomedical and information-based technologies. He was instrumental at IBM in the formation of the Information-Based Medicine Group and continues as a serial entrepreneur to create partnerships that accelerate adoption of personalized medicine through genomics and cognitive computing. Dr. Yu received his PhD from Yale and his postdoc from UC Berkeley. Thank you, Dr. Yu.
Thanks, Rick. I didn't do anything yet. No need to clap. So this afternoon we have some speakers that will talk more about kind of what the reality of AI in healthcare. So you heard some great talks. George covered kind of the history of AI and where we are on kind of the hype cycle. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. What is the data and what do we do with it? So we have a company called HybridChart that will tell you about how they're trying to really transform and streamline how we deal with EMR data about patients. And we'll also hear from policy experts and folks from, who deal with education, because we have to understand how do we make AI explainable, as well as for everyone in this room, why should it matter to me? So with that, I'm going to just jump into slides. I'm going to try and go quickly on mine. Yeah, go ahead. Oh, yeah, Nico. All right. So Nico, our social media fanatic, hashtag AIAZ18. If you tweet at all, please include that, and it will run a record for everyone. So I'm going to go really quickly through my slides so that we have as much time as possible towards the end of the day. I think the session that I'm really looking forward to is we'll have a panel of students. Systems Imagination's Margaret Linnen is going to MC that. She graduated from BMI and is going to tell you about how people get jobs in this industry as well with the advent of AI. So with that, I'm going to jump right in. I'm going to talk a little bit about genomics and healthcare, because that's where a lot of this is happening today for artificial intelligence. Systems Imagination, we're a 4-year-old bootstrapped company, which means we really just kind of put our own money into it because we really wanted to prove that this could be done, that timing was right. My co-founder, Spiro Moussès, I don't think he's here today, but he and I got together and realized that the generation of all this data meant tools had to exist to analyze this torrent of data and make it useful for everyone. We based ourselves in Scottsdale, and there's some pros and cons to that, which we can talk about later. And our job is to take data from the public domain, all this genomic data that's being published in repositories, all of the scientific literature, and combine that with customer data. So in the case of pharmaceutical companies, clinical trial data, and other information where they want to develop better new drugs for patients. And what we've done so far is really built a process around using AI every day to help us compute against the data that we collect. And really, one of the things I started thinking about when I was putting the slide sets together last night at 3 a.m. for Rick, it was due a week ago, was really think about what are the big challenges. There are really 3 big challenges for us in this industry that require AI. This is why AI makes sense. Biomedical data is really hard to store. It's just massive. It's complex, and it's all over the place, right? And so you have this issue of everything from all the information about a cell and what's happening there to laboratory research, whether it's in a pharma company or an academic center, to how do you represent knowledge electronically. And you obviously need compute and crazy algorithms. Kendall, our mathematician, can probably tell you what all this means, right? Not me. So those are the issues. So in more detail, George talked about this earlier, over time, over the past 20 plus years, the growth has been exponential, right? When you just measure, this is just a proxy, okay? This is just nucleotide sequence deposited in NCBI, which is the US container for this kind of base pair data. It's just grown exponentially, and the red line is how many users have accessed that data over the same period. So as much as we're putting data in, we're taking it out. Okay, that's one. 2 is, this is a log scale. You can't see it, but this line represents the number of full human genome sequences up to, I think, 2016, if I remember, 2015, 2016, and what the graph will look like over the next 10 years. And what it shows is, it is a logarithmic growth. generally speaking, Moore's law is somewhere under here, and even in the lowercase scenarios, you're still getting this tremendous growth of genomic data. Again, a proxy for all of this data that we're generating. I think one of George's slides showed that the average hospital is producing, 600 plus petabytes of data, and that's incredible. So with all that data comes complexity. This is one of my favorite slides, because this is a fellow by the name of Dr. Michal. He has spent 40 plus years building this poster, which he's kind of virtually holding here. I remember when I was in the lab, not 40 plus years ago, but a long time ago, we had this poster up on the wall, and it had about probably 1/10 the information of what it has now, right? And all this is all the different kind of key biochemical pathways that occur in one cell, right? So Krebs cycle, that kind of stuff. And then this blowout is just, since I remembered it, these are the transmembrane signaling proteins and all the things that occur to signal a cell to do something. He's just kept adding to it, right? Well, this is a two-dimensional picture. It does not represent what happens when cells do what they do, right? You cannot say, oh, I know exactly what's happening when a normal cell turns into a cancer cell. You can't represent this way. But this is our best shot today at kind of trying to capture all this. So we think there's a better way to do that using AI. And so the last problem that we have is data sharing. This is kind of a pictorial from the NCI of how genomes get analyzed, and then some sort of data gets deposited. This arrow showing, hey, how does the data get to a patient and a physician talking to the patient? I mean, who actually owns this data? Do you know? Like, if you go to a hospital, you get a biopsy. Is that yours? Do you know that if you go to a hospital, it's not yours? It's the hospital's, right? That's your tissue, but the hospital actually owns that tissue, right? So is it the same with genomic DNA? Is it the same with any of the data that's being generated? I think these are some policy questions that we're going to have to deal with, and Gary Merchant later today is going to help us think through some of those, I hope. And that's a big challenge, is how do you share it if you don't even know if you own it? And then let's just take a quick peek at one data set, genomics. I'm a firm believer that within 10 years, everyone who has access to genome sequencing data will be sequenced. The BMI department and Illumina put on an event called Understand Your Genome earlier this year. I wasn't able to go, unfortunately, but it's pretty clear this main driver, $100 genome, is going to force us all to get genome sequence done. There are now, we're not talking about tens of thousands of genomes, now we're talking about millions, right? All of us is a million genome program. AstraZeneca is sequencing 2 million. Europe is responding by sequencing 1 million. China is responding by sequencing millions. Korea is sequencing 10 million. So what does this mean? I actually think that the competition is good. Competition in any market is good. The thing that it's doing is creating kind of a race, because when you think about it, all of us are natural resources to a country, right? We're a workforce. We need to be healthy. We need to be able to be highly educated. At the same time, we need to know about our genes and our genetic makeup and why we can stay healthy and productive for a country. And so what will be very, very interesting is, again, who owns the data, and what are the rules? What's going to happen when we're all sequenced? We don't actually know. But we do know that AI is, we will need those rules before AI is implemented fully on this kind of data. And to do true precision medicine, you're going to need the healthcare system to be set up that way. So everybody knows where data goes and for what reason. So I think I just mentioned really quickly large volumes of data. If there's a needle in a haystack and that haystack just grows exponentially, AI is very good at finding needles in those cases because they can do things that we can't. It can scale. Humans cannot scale the way that they look at data. Cloud computing, Amazon, Google, Microsoft, they're all providing opportunities today for any individual to use AI in the cloud. Any one of us today could, for a couple of dollars now, use an algorithm. That's really interesting. I think that kind of democratizes things. And then finally, AI, when we're talking about that kind of two-dimensional poster structure of data of prior biological knowledge, AI is interesting because if you implement these kind of learning networks, these neural networks properly, you can actually have the system adapt new data as it comes in and insert it properly into any data representation. That's a lot of words, but basically what it means is AI can help us with state change. When a cell goes from being normal to tumor, it can actually help us predict what data is going to be important in those processes. This was something George referred to earlier, and his question was, where are we on the hype cycle? This is something that Gartner has been doing for 25 years for new technologies. It's very interesting. This is 2005. Okay, I don't know if you can see some of these things. This is 2017, last year. George, we are right here, according to Gartner. It's funny, like something like over here, there's augmented reality somewhere around here. I can't even actually see it. It's, oh, right here. Augmented reality in 2005. Augmented reality is somewhere around here in 2017. So they get some things right, they get others wrong. I actually think that even though we're here, and we do have the risk of going here, M is going to be big. In other words, y equals mx plus b, it's going to go like this. And here's why. AI has there are two things going on now that is driving AI in what Jensen Huang of the CEO of NVIDIA calls it double exponential growth, which is crazy when you think about it. It's this formula here, a to the b to the x, right? GPUs are driving Moore's law into obsolescence. This is Moore's law. This is GPU computing performance over 5 years, okay, the past 5 years. Because data is also growing, I showed you that other graph where data is growing on an exponential curve as well. These two, growing both at exponential rates, means that AI and its application, you're creating this just insane ability to kind of leverage all that data, right? You have the compute and the data. And of course, hopefully Heather will also mention how education and healthcare are the domains that are first to be disrupted. Okay. The other thing to note, and this is another kind of just readout of what's going on. It's just an example of where we're going to be in 5 to 10 years. We call it a Cambrian explosion of AI companies, right? I think Jaida had a similar slide. I took this from yet another industry report. It's listed down here. I can send it to anybody who's interested. Hey, I think we're right here. Yeah, we are. Okay, that's us. Over the last 5 years, 100-some companies, 100% compound annual growth rate in investments. Market size will be $10 billion by 2024, 35% CAGR rate, right? It's just going to keep growing like crazy. This means that all of these guys are creating new solutions to deal with data using AI. So new models are appearing. Amgen, 2012, they bought a company called Decode. If some of you are familiar with that, it was a very forward-thinking company. They were the first to try and sequence a population. They sequenced the entire Icelandic genome, basically, right? 2012, everyone thought it was crazy to buy that company for $400 million. Now, about 75% of their drugs are genetically targeted because of the data that comes from Decode. And the head of R&D basically said, that's returned several ROI based on that one acquisition. And it's because you can now do more to understand why therapies work or don't work. Flatiron, that's a company that was formed a little less than 4 years ago, I think, by 2 Google executives, just recently acquired for $2 billion by Roche last month. And the reason is it is collecting EMR data on cancer patients. And again, we'll hear more from a company after me about this. And so I did want to mention, why is this relevant to us in this room? Okay, so in Arizona, it has been a challenge. I've been at this for 10 years, trying to start companies, do data analytics, life sciences, healthcare. Capital has been a problem, right? It's like, how do you find sophisticated investors who understand this? Elsewhere, you may find, if you look at this map and you put it on the map of the world, 90% of these are either San Francisco or Boston, right? So what we have to do is be creative and inventive in forming new companies. So we spun off a company called Systems Oncology to use what we do on the data analytics side and all of our AI techniques to find new drugs. Because that way we can create more value and more assets that become something that then gets sold, right? Those become success stories. So this is Systems Oncology. They have a nice website that basically it says what they do. You know, they want to get to faster cures using big data analytics, find smarter insights. And the company does this by using the hypergraph that we built. Here's your DGX. Where's my NVIDIA guy? There's Steve. Here's the DGX. It's already obsolete. This is how fast it's moving. We bought this in December from Trace3, the company that's sponsoring this event. As of last week, it's already obsolete. They have a new system that's 10-fold faster, just like that. And we want that one too. Where's Trace3? We want that one too. So we have one of the largest hypergraphs ever built of biological knowledge, and we're doing AI on it. And that is the future. It gives this company the ability to understand why a particular target has a particular vulnerability in a model like a disease like cancer, and find the drugs that could be developed to solve those problems. And that's been very exciting. It's a company that it's formed 2 years ago, okay, and it's already got assets. It's already close to doing the deals that it needs to be successful. The last slide I will show you before the conclusion slide is more examples of why we're on that y equals mxp slope. We're not going to fall into this disillusionment trough, in my opinion. These are 3 different studies, all published within the last 6 months. Okay, melanoma, breast cancer metastasized to lymph node, and then the retinal fundus that George had talked about. We are now able to see in more detail. So, using AI, basically this paper shows that a trained neural network can detect cancer as good as your dermatologist, if not better, but we won't go there. I think let's just say it's as good as, okay? In this case, breast cancer metastasized to lymph node, once again, convolutional neural networks, in this case, 3 different algorithms through a challenge called the, what's this called again, the Camelon 16 challenge, where they just gave a ton of these slide images and said, what can you detect? As good as a panel of, I think it was 11 pathologists. Supposedly it was better than pathologists who, they segmented them into pathologists who had all day to look at images and pathologists who are in the normal work setting where they don't have any time to look at it and they can only look at it for 5 minutes and move on, is much, much better, obviously, than the pathologists who don't have a lot of time to look at slides. Finally, this one, published last month, retinal scan. These are all kind of the factors that are normally used. It's the gold standard for, does a patient have a risk of an adverse cardiovascular event, heart attack, stroke, et cetera. There's a system called SCORE that everybody uses. Using just the retinal scan and trained neural networks, you get as good a diagnosis as having to measure all of these different factors like age, gender, smoking, et cetera. So we're at that stage. These systems are set up now, they work. It's going to be a question of, do we augment the physicians and nurses, or do we replace them? And we're not going to replace them. Let's face it, we're going to augment them. So how these get deployed, in what settings, with what rules around the data, and then kind of how we work it in the workflow is the key. So I'm just going to give you the final conclusions. It's just remarkable. The progress is remarkable. I don't think we're going to fall into the pit of despair. I think we're just going to keep growing as an industry. The industry is going to need some support because, switch down to here, I think AI may sometimes be more wrong than right? You're training a system. So we have to be aware of that, and therefore we're going to need some new frameworks to think about this. We're going to need explainable, we're going to need accountable, and we're going to need something that's, as they call it, symmetric. We're going to need it across all different socioeconomic states. And I'm really excited because I think later, towards the end of the day, we're going to hear about students and how they kind of come across AI in the workplace today. So thank you very much. What we're going to do is we're going to hold questions until later, just like the earlier morning thing, where we're going to bring us all up and sit and ask and answer questions in a group. So thank you very much.